Welcome back, everyone. We are having fun at another Pages Promotions Virtual Book Festival 2020 episode. This is a production of Indie Reads TV, and we find our home at C&M TV in Troy, Michigan. Today, our author is Elizabeth Thomas, and she's going to be sharing a reading with us and talking a little bit about her work. And then we're going to have some time for questions and answers afterwards. So, Elizabeth, welcome. Thanks for coming.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank y'all for coming too.
Yeah, this is kind of fun. It's a different way of doing this during the time of COVID, but once the world gets back to normal, we'll be back in the studio again, and we'll certainly have you back. Elizabeth, can you tell us a little bit about your background as a writer, please?
Well, I started writing stories when I was 9 years old and just never got out of the habit. Knew from very early on that I wanted to be a writer. Of course, like a lot of us, I still have to have my day job.
Sure.
But I went to the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, studied English language and literature, studied the period of time that my novel is set in. So that made it a whole lot easier to write.
Excellent. Can you tell us a little bit about the book you're going to read today? Give us some background on the book, and then I will give you the floor so you can just jump right in and start the reading.
Okay, well, it is a historical romance, and even though my reading is going to be family friendly, it's kind of a pretty steamy book, just for fair warning.
Good to know.
It's set during the 1660s in England, and during the Restoration, after the English Civil War, when King Charles II came back to the throne, and when the first women were allowed to act on stage. And the novel is called Arden's Act, and Arden West, the heroine, she runs away to London to be an actress on stage. She's also running from her lecherous Puritan stepfather. And the part that I'm going to read is she's just had a rather terrifying encounter with some rogue lords, aristocrats, on the street, but she's made it into the backstage area of the Duke's Company's theater. She's already made a couple of friends, and she's about to have her audition.
Fantastic. I'm looking forward to this. Being a past theater person, full-fledged thespian, card-carrying member, I'm super interested in this. So if you would please go ahead with your reading.
Will do. Thank you very much, ma'am. I just got to find the book here all right, okay. The Transformation Arden's, I forgot to mention, I know you're never supposed to have a scene where the character describes herself in a mirror, but this is legit because she's backstage and she's got to see how her borrowed costume looks. So it's
okay. That sounds fair. It's one of the rules you get to break. Okay.
Right. Okay. The transformation Arden saw in the large framed wall mirror bordered on the remarkable. The costume Millie had chosen for her, a bright yellow silk, made her green eyes bigger and brighter. Like emeralds, he said. She thought the squared neckline extremely low. It exposed much more of her than made her comfortable. Better than looking like a Puritan, she told herself. Her black stockings had been replaced by white, and her plain black boots replaced by dainty slippers with heels, covered over in the same yellow silk as the gown. At Brian's urging, Millie had secured some of the company's paste jewelry for her. A strand of glass diamonds hung around her neck, while a few more dangled from her ears. Even though she'd brought some stunning pieces she'd inherited with her to London, she preferred not to show any wealth in strange surroundings. At any rate, Arden had not been so well attired since her father had been alive, and then she had been a mere child, unaccustomed to the fashions of a young lady. Treadwell would not recognize me, but Papa would. He must have known I'd look like this someday. Her father, who had selected plays for her to read ever since she had learned her letters, would also have understood her becoming an actress. Never mind that it was a brand new calling and certainly rarely contemplated by a woman of her family background. Arden smiled when Brian led her to Davenant, even though they caught the company's owner in the midst of saying, "She'd better be a good one. I've already looked at a horde of chits today at the regular time." A little disappointed when Brian did not offer his employer a vigorous reply, Arden nevertheless stood straight and tall before Davenant. She tried not to stare at his false silver nose and readied herself to launch into Juliet's final scene when Davenant asked her for a sample of her talents. Instead, he cheerfully commanded, "Show us your legs." Memories of Buckingham lifting her skirts chilled her, but Courtney's words came back to Arden and oddly calmed her. Actresses merely serve as ornaments. Well, if she had to make her beginning that way, so be it. She could convince Davenant and the others of her talent once hired. Cheeks flushing, she obeyed his request. Fortunately, she knew she had nothing to be ashamed of. The clingy white silk stockings only enhanced the natural shapeliness of her long legs. Davenant gave Arden a quick nod of approval. "Dance," he told her. "But there's no music," Arden protested. Not to mention she'd not had any dancing lessons since Treadwell had married her mother. "May I have one of the musicians come over with his instrument?" She gestured to a group of men in the corner whose tuning and practicing did not amount yet to melody, but only added to the general din. "Anyone can dance to music," replied Davenant. "We separate the girls from the women by seeing who can dance without. Go on, dance." For a moment, Arden stood nonplussed. She had no partner. Should she borrow Brian for what she remembered of a stately pavane? Then she recalled the time her father had returned from aiding the Duke of Ormond in Ireland, how he had quickly taught her an Irish dance while his valet, Jack Clark, had played the fiddle. Oh, but Jack could play too. Loud and furious and full of spirit. Still holding up her skirts, Arden concentrated on the memory of Jack's music and the steps her father had shown her. She began to dance, prancing and whirling despite the heeled slippers. When the old strains died in her head, Arden gracefully halted, breathing with her effort. The din continued in the background, but Brian, Millie, Davenant, and a tall, dark-eyed man in a powdered wig, who had come to stand beside them, stayed utterly silent. Then Brian began to clap and whistle, and Davenant, beaming at the other man, asked him, "Well, Betterton, what do you think of her?" Betterton? Arden had just danced before Thomas Betterton, the premier actor of the London stage. Thank the dear Lord I did not know it ahead of time, she thought. "She'll do as a dancer," agreed the actor. "Right," said Davenant. "But what can she do with a piece? Do you have anything prepared that you would like to recite for us?" he asked Arden. "Juliet's death," she announced. "Oh, that again," sighed Davenant. Arden paused to feel the scene, pushing her awareness of the importance of her audience and Davenant's lack of enthusiasm from her mind. She began to see Friar Lawrence before her, began feeling Romeo's agonizing loss in her heart. She waved the priest away with a graceful hand and wailed, "Go, get thee hence, for I will not away." Arden lowered her gaze purposefully to the floor, seeing the pale corpse of a handsome young man stretched beneath her. In the intensity of her mood, she did not recognize the finely chiseled features of the stranger who had rescued her outside the theater. "What's here?" Arden asked softly. "A cup closed in my true love's hand? Poison, I see, hath been his timeless end. She bent to take the imagined vessel from the imagined dead hand, turning it upside down before her face. Oh, churl, drunk all and left no friendly drop to help me after, Arden exclaimed, casting down the cup. She began bending again to the fallen man, kneeling beside the body as she quickly affirmed, I will kiss thy lips, haply some poison yet doth hang on them to make me die with a restorative. She tenderly touched her lips to her vision. Thy lips are warm, she said sorrowfully. Then she snapped her head around, looking behind her. Yea, noise? Arden queried. She returned her gaze to the body, searching for something. She found her answer. Oh, happy dagger, Arden cried, grabbing the weapon strapped to her beloved still form. This is thy sheath, she hissed, plunging it above her bosom. There rust and let me die, she breathed, letting her eyes fall shut and collapsing completely limp on the floor. Bravo, shouted Brian, helping Arden up. Oh yes, agreed Millie. You're ever so good, miss. I could almost see the cup, the dagger, and the poor dead lover. Arden flushed with the praise. She had given one of her best performances, better than the rehearsals alone in her room after Treadwell had gone out and couldn't possibly hear. What do you think? Davenant asked Betterton again. Has to work on her projection. No idea what she'd do with the rhymed couplets, but there's a certain amount of raw talent. She'll do for a bit player, concluded Betterman. Considered Davenant. He crossed to Arden and took a length of her dark hair in his hand. Particularly if you dye this blonde. It's the style now, you know. Arden flushed again, but not with pleasure this time. A certain raw talent, bit player, dye my hair blonde. But she pushed her pride aside. Far more important she be part of the Duke's company. In time she could show them. In time she might be playing opposite Betterton himself. She had almost started to nod her acceptance at Davenant when she heard his voice again. Absolutely not, Davenant. You will not have her mar that mahogany beauty merely to make her look like every other false blonde on your stage. Give her a part with her real hair. Rayburn's wench is starting to show too much for decency in the servant's role, so let this one play it. I'll be there watching this afternoon, and if you have her blonde, Davenant, I'll give all my patronage to Killigrew and the Kingsmen. As he spoke, Courtney strode up to stand with Davenant and Betterton. With a start, Arden realized she had projected his face, albeit a bit less mature, onto her Romeo. Except, of course, this man's face appeared very much alive. His dark eyes again looked at her with frank appreciation. He smiled broadly as well, showing off a set of fine white teeth. Very well, agreed Davenant. Lord Robert is not to be questioned in matters of theatrical taste. You may have the part, mistress. What did you say her name was, Brian? Arden West, Arden announced before Brian could say it for her. She'd done it. She would walk the stage that afternoon. And that's it.
Well done. Thank you so very much. Oh, that's right. There's our sign language clapping. I'm glad you remembered, Luba. Thank you. Thank you so much for the reading. Do we have any questions or comments from anyone in the room?
I'm intrigued.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead, Luba.
I've just always admired people who write historical fiction. I studied history in university, and I, at one point wanted to do, I was thinking about doing a work that took place during the Renaissance, but I just have always been intimidated. So can you talk a little bit about your research process?
Well, I have to say, this one was easy because I studied the literature of the time period while I was at U of M, and I had a fabulous professor who felt that the history was really integral to understanding the literature. So got a lot of the history that way. I mean, I still had to make library runs and look up various things and check, but I kind of cheated by having it be about a period I was already deeply interested in.
I don't think that's cheating. I think that's putting to use good knowledge.
Right.
No, that's a good use of things. And I'm glad to say I'm glad to see that you stayed really close. So, I mean, is this a continued passion? I found the book link and I put it in chat, but
Thank you, Andrew.
And I went ahead and bought it because I'll read it this afternoon tonight. But are there follow-ups for Arden?
Eventually, it's going to be more in the way of like a family saga. Like I have one in mind that is one of her granddaughters or great granddaughters in Michigan during the Civil War, because I've always wanted to do a Civil War book from the Northern perspective. And I had one in mind about her grandson in Quebec at some point, because that's another place we don't usually go in historical romance, but I'm not getting as many good plot ideas for that one, so I'm not sure at this point.
I happen to know of a book that is written by a local author in Michigan, and many of you know them, but they wrote it from the north side of the Civil War, inside of Michigan, and the different things that were happening then. So they are out there, but I look forward to reading it. I'm impressed. You made the statement early on that this is a little steamy in places, but a lot of the books that people say are a little steamy, to find that much time without it being steamy is difficult in the book.
It was. I was like, oh my goodness, what am I going to read?
I'm glad you found a suitable piece for our family-friendly program.
Even then, I had to clip little parts out, but
I appreciate that.
You'll find I have your same problem, but from a different perspective. I just can't find a place that I'm not slaughtering someone terribly. It's horrible. But,
yeah, Andrew's reading is going to be lots of fun later in the month.
I have to say, I may stick to a short story from one of my books of short stories, just simply to be safe, instead of, we can't rip their head off or something like that. That would be bad.
Well, that might be a good choice. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons Andy read what he read last night. So, yeah, absolutely. Any other questions or comments for Elizabeth?
Just a really specific one, because I was totally intrigued, was just, and I'm not sure whether you would know the answer to this, but what kind of dye would they have used on their hair in those days?
You know, that is a really good question, and I'm afraid I don't know the answer. I'm not sure what would make blonde, but I know they used things like nutshells and just like real natural herbal things, but I'm not really certain.
Yeah, they use similar kinds of components back in the Egyptian times as well to do dyes and facial paint and that sort of thing. So yeah, but kudos to you for continuing to write the story, sticking with the character, and not getting lost down the rabbit hole of research. Good for you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have comments or questions for Elizabeth?
Deborah has one. I know she does. Yeah. You knew
See what he did to you there?
I don't have a question, but I will say that even though I don't read a lot of steamy romances, you definitely piqued my interest, and I clicked on the link and I'm like, oh, I love the cover, and so I might have to read yours.
Well, there is a lot of historical stuff to it. I mean, even though I think it's steamy, I also feel that there's a real story to it. It's not just people all over the place doing things, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Right. I have a question for you as a thespian myself, with a long, strong history in the theater. Were you part of the theater history? Did you have that as part of your background, or did you just kind of draw that as your setting, and do some research to add that in?
It's a little bit of both. I became very active with my local community theater for a time, and I have acted in plays, and I've even written a play. It's called The Circle. It's completely different than this because it's like about a high school reunion for people who graduated in the 80s.
Okay, yeah, a complete departure.
Right, but I've had it. I've had versions of it performed in various places. The official published version has not yet been performed, and I'm looking to make that happen. And it probably would have happened this year if it hadn't been for the virus.
Right. Yeah. Lots of things would have happened if not for. So that's great. You're actually drawing from a real experiential background. I love books that have that component to them because it really connects me. And then there are authors out there, and they know who they are. They're really good liars, which makes it also just as enjoyable to read. So I like knowing, if you have that background or not. It kind of gives me some insight into the book when I sit down to read. Any other questions or comments for Elizabeth before we wrap up our event this evening? Nope. Okay. Thanks everybody for coming. I really appreciate you coming and supporting Elizabeth and her writing. Please jump on our Facebook festival page to learn more about all of the authors. Andrew,
jumping on your Facebook page.
Love you so much, Andrew. So go over to the Facebook page, find out what's going on with everybody. You can find the links to books and the links to author pages there. And you can learn more about everything we're doing. We are doing contests. Today we gave away our first Saturday box of books signed by authors. So we're doing those every Saturday in October. So make sure you get in on that deal. And we're doing a trick-or-treat game with virtual candy to go in your virtual pillowcase. So check that out as well. In the meantime, I'm going to see if I can do this. Yeah, see, it takes longer. Thank you, Elizabeth, for coming. We really appreciate you sharing your work with us, and we look forward to reading your work and seeing more from you.
Well, I'm really grateful for the opportunity.
Thank you. We are going to wrap up tonight's evening. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming, and we'll see you again on Pages Promotions, Indie Reads TV. Good night.
Good night. Thank you.